Welcome to Business Talk with me, Michael Avery, here on Business Tech. And it's time to talk about the aviation industry. The airline industry has been extremely hard hit by the COVID-19 crisis, even harder perhaps than by the events of 9/11 and the 2008 global financial crisis put together. We've seen unprecedented consequences. Many airlines grounded all or almost all of their planes in the first lockdown. And we've certainly seen fewer people traveling through the year, and now we've got the second wave with restrictions as well. Beaches closed. What does that mean for tourism? Well, when flying through such turbulence, it's critical to focus on the horizon, and that's, I'm sure, exactly what my next guest is doing. Elmar Conradie, CEO of Safair. Elmar, welcome to Business Talk. And you've been busy doing deals. You've done a deal with Qatar Airways recently. Talk to me broadly just about how you've managed from that first crisis. I recall chatting to you last year, and it was all about just managing cash flow to where you are now.
Yeah, so right after the first lockdown, there was still a lot of uncertainty, and we started with business travel first. And I have to admit, at that stage, it was almost a case of we were wondering whether it's not better just not to fly at all. The demand was so low. But luckily, we moved into level 2 quite quickly after that. And we could immediately see an increase in demand when we went into level 2. And then in level 1, the demand was actually pretty good. It was nowhere close to what it was in 2019. To give you an idea, in 2019, on average, the airports in South Africa would handle about 60,000 passengers a day. We managed to get up to about 30,000 passengers a day in December. Unfortunately, we then entered into level 3 again, and that's fallen off a cliff, and it's down to about 10,000, 11,000 passengers a day again. So That's been very difficult to manage, and also to adjust our schedules. Unfortunately, we had to frustrate and irritate our customers a lot, changing schedules on a regular basis. Curfews come and go, but every time the curfew changes, we have to change our schedules to try and fly within the curfew times. And then every time it's canceling flights and moving passengers around. So it's been an interesting few months, that's for sure.
It's like playing Tetris on steroids. Maybe we could just stay on that for a moment longer, Elmar, because I'm sure many flyers during this period would be understanding of the pressures that airlines are under. But how difficult is it to manage airlines through a crisis like this in terms of scheduling, ensuring that you have full planes at least that are flying to the destinations and returning? Just talk to me about how you operationally manage that.
I think it's one of those instances where it looks a lot simpler than what people realize. The schedule, the airplanes don't just do one flight a day. They do up to 6 flights a day. So if you start tinkering with any of the flights in between the first and the last flight, it's got a knock-on effect throughout the whole day. And then on top of that, we also have certain restrictions and rules around how long our pilots can fly, and we call it flight and duty time. So we have to manage that and make sure we stay within that. And then, also with the curfews. So it caused absolute havoc. And I think the thing what was the worst about the situation is we had no advanced warning. So, I remember that Monday night when the president announced level 3, we literally had no chance to prepare for the next morning 6 a.m. flights, and the curfews were with immediate effect. So that makes it incredibly difficult. Even now at the moment, we've got a much reduced schedule that we plan to fly, but because the demand is so low, because people just don't have any reason to fly, we even have to cancel or combine flights 2 to 3 days before the actual departure date. We have to still change the schedule, because otherwise, look, at this stage, we're pretty much flying at a loss anyway, but we'll fly at a bigger loss if we continue with those flights.
Yeah, and it's similar to what those in the alcohol industry have said as well, about very little communication from government and no clear communication about how long they can expect to be shut down for as an industry, and many businesses saying, right, if you tell us it's 2 months, we can at least plan. We know the kind of cash flow hole that we're going to have to plug, and we can operate because we have some kind of certainty. It's the uncertainty, it's the lack of communication that really gets to businesses. If you were to give government advice now, perhaps potentially going into winter and some talk of another lockdown, then a third wave, what would it be just to help the airline industry better manage this crisis?
Look, I think it would be good to have a little bit of advanced warning about some of the restrictions like curfews and things like that, because to change it the day before is incredibly hard. But I have to say, what's made this a little bit easier than the first wave is we've got the first wave as a sort of benchmark, or it gives us an idea of what to expect. So we've done a few scenarios, and we said, if we're lucky, we just have a second wave, and this is how long we think it will take. I mean, we're not experts in pandemics at all, but we just look at the history. That's the danger of being an accountant. You always use the history to forecast the future. So we looked at the history. We looked at how long it took the previous time to get out of lockdown into phase 3, into phase 2. How long did it take for the numbers to come down? So at this stage, we're using the historical numbers to gauge and do a few scenarios of how long we expect to stay in these levels.
And as you said earlier, though, the numbers did bounce back when we went from level 3 to level 2, and so there does seem to still be pent up demand in the system. Do you expect that to be similar again when the second wave recedes?
I think so. I think especially because so many people wanted to go away in December, but they weren't sure about going away in December, and they didn't plan to go away. And I think they sort of waited to see what's going to happen. And I think if we actually see declining numbers, we should see quite a bit of demand for travel, especially because it's still warm. February, March is still warm. Lots of long weekends. There's a bit of a school holiday, March, April. So I see an uptick. Interestingly enough, one of the things I never expected to have such a dramatic impact on our demand is the sale of alcohol. That definitely affects whether people want to go away. They don't want to go down to Cape Town and go to a restaurant and they have to be home by 8 and they can't have a glass of wine with their meal. That's having quite a big impact. So even relaxing some of those rules, I think we'll see a uptick in demand. But I think the reality, and what's a little bit scary for the airline industry at this stage is worldwide they're forecasting that the demand will not recover to the 2019 level numbers soon. At best, it might get back to about 80%. And I mean, that's when things get back to normal. And that's because changes in people's behaviors, business travel, people will travel less for business, things like that.
Right.
So for quite a while, we're going to have too many seats in the market, too much supply. It's going to put a lot of pressure on ticket prices in terms of downwards pressure. So it's great for the flying public. They're going to get some ridiculously good prices, I think, in the next 12 months. But it's going to be tough for the airlines.
How do you ameliorate those impacts? How do you then plan in your scenario planning for a period like that? Do you see there being some consolidation in the local market? And do you see a partnership like the one you've entered into with Qatar Airways being a blueprint for the future?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, we've always followed the approach that we need to try and sell our tickets wherever we can. So partnerships like with Qatar and Emirates, it's another way for us to sell tickets to through the international partners, so through their websites. Unfortunately, at this stage, it doesn't look like international travel is gonna return soon. So, I mean, basically what we're focusing on is reducing costs as much as we can, looking after our cash flows. And we're looking at where else can we potentially sell our product, if I can call it like that. At the moment, we're only selling our product in South Africa. Maybe there's some opportunities regionally or something else that we can do to get back to the numbers where we were. But I guess what we're trying to do at this stage is just to be incredibly conservative about the future.
When you say sell your product regionally, is that to become potentially a regional airline on the back of the African Continental Free Trade Area? There does seem to be a lot of momentum behind that, and hopefully the free movement of labor gets sorted out, and that will open up those markets.
Yeah, so one of the things that they've been talking about in Africa for quite a while is the single African air transport market, where there's no rules about where airlines can fly, no traffic rights. At the moment, we're still bound by traffic rights and bilaterals. At the moment, we've only got one route that we're allowed to fly, and we got that approved in December only, and that's to Mauritius. But obviously, right at this moment, nobody can fly to Mauritius because they've got their own restrictions in terms of international travel coming into the country. But that's what we mean by that. Just maybe gives us another market to offset our product in.
Right. And I believe Mauritius is already rolling out their vaccination program, and they're an island, so it's a lot easier for them to have ensured that they are less affected by COVID-19. But it is, as we know, because of its tax laws, a very welcoming jurisdiction for South African business travelers as well as holiday makers. And I think we might see that route becoming quite busy when things return to normal. It's unfortunate, though, that we've got this SA variant, which is now commonplace across the global news wires. And I watch these news programs, and no one talks about the China virus. It just isn't spoken like that. But we're being stigmatized with this SA variant. That's certainly not going to help our travel prospects.
No, and I think that is, again, I mean, you made the comment earlier about the uncertainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty about how this will be handled in the future in terms of international travel. A lot of countries at this stage require you to have the PCR test before you fly. But what's going to be interesting is now especially with the, like you say, the SA variant or the UK variant, are they going to have additional rules around that? A lot of the countries have blocked us already. The UK has blocked us. The US has blocked us. And then there's a lot of uncertainty about, what's it going to mean once people start being vaccinated? Would you be able to allow to fly? Will the UK only accept certain vaccines when you fly, or would they accept any vaccine that's on the market? There's all these kinds of things that nobody really knows how it's going to work in the future. But look, people are resilient, and people are highly adaptable. I think, we as a human race have come where we are because of travel, the exchange of ideas, the exchange of knowledge. And I think we crave that. I don't think it will ever stop, that we'll stop flying and traveling the world. So I think there will be a demand coming back. It might not be exactly the same, and it will maybe or definitely be a little bit different to what we were used to.
In terms of assistance from a government, and we look at AXA, AXA's a state-owned enterprise here, and can go and borrow in the market at probably better rates than most during a crisis, because it's backed by the sovereign. What sort of support have you seen from AXA, and what would the industry like to see in terms of support? Because we do see other continental or regional airport operations supporting their airline industries.
So we had some assistance from AXA. They helped us a little bit with some of our leases. We lease quite a substantial part of the property, our hangars and maintenance facility from them. So they did assist a little bit with deferrals and reductions for a short period last year. But what I think that the reality is, I mean, I was one of the people during lockdown that really advocated that that's one way that government can assist the airlines, is to reduce the costs when we finally get back in the air, so that we don't lose more money. But I think the reality has just turned out, I'm not sure anybody last year, March, expected this thing to go on for a year, and now it looks like it's going to be 2 years. And the entities like AXA, the airports company, the air traffic and navigation system, weather services, they actually have their own financial problems as well, if not bigger than the airlines. The airlines didn't fly. At the moment, if you take the airlines are only flying a sixth of the passengers they used to fly, that means that AXA's revenue is down at least 5-6, and that's not even taking international travel into account.
Yeah.
So their revenues at this stage is basically non-existent. So I expect government will have to, at some stage, help AXA, ATNS, all of these government entities out. So I'm not sure there is any scope to help the airlines. I guess the only thing we're asking for is maybe a level playing field where if they do help out an airline, that they help out all the airlines.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're not seeing that at the moment with the support of SAA and by extension Mango as well. What do you make of the ongoing issues around SAA? And a lot of people have pointed to the SAA bailout, effectively of a further 10 billion rand, as money that could have been spent on rolling out vaccines. And we know the sooner that we roll out a vaccine, the better, because the quicker we'll get back to some kind of economic normalcy.
Look, I mean, I think everybody agrees with that. You know, it doesn't make sense to put money into something that it's not even creating something new. It's just settling old debts. What I'm not 100% up to date with is how much of a choice government's got in that funding. You know, what would be the consequences if they do not fund SAA with the 10 billion? I think the question is more, you know, do you really need to keep on going at it? Understand past stuff, you need to settle your past debts, but do you really need to continue with it and potentially needing to bail it out again in a year or 2 years' time and put more money in again?
What would the impact be if it was allowed to hit the wall in terms of the broader sector? Because it's not just airlines, it's technical, it's servicing, cargo and freight and all that kind of thing. Do you see, if there were to be a future without SAA, those still being maintained as some kind of state-owned entity or picked up by the private sector? How would the industry absorb that?
Well, if you look at it, the industry's been operating without SAA for a year now. SAA Technical is still going, and I think there's a real need for SAA Technical to continue because they are supporting Mango and Kame, so Kulula and British Airways. So I think there's a need for SAA Technical. But I think SAA as such, I mean, they've been closed for a year, so there's no impact basically on the industry without them.
It shows you we can survive without it. Just as we've hit the end of our time, Elmar, personally, as a leader through a crisis like this, I'm sure it stretched you. I'm sure it's revealed things about you, perhaps that you weren't aware of. If you look back now, it's been almost a year. What really stands out for you as a sort of leadership lesson that you've taken from this crisis?
Look, I think there were a few times where we were incredibly fortunate with some of the decisions that we made. But I think what stands out for me is that initially we made the decision that we don't know how long this is going to carry on. So we want to make sure that but we don't want to lose people. So instead of going into retrenchments and stuff, we rallied all the teams and all the people working for us and said to them, you know, we need to sort of work together here and cut salaries rather than retrenching. And that worked well for us because when we could start flying again, we had all our staff ready and we could get into the air quite quickly, which helped us to get back to normal salaries quite quickly. And then what I just found is, you know, you sort of need to go back to first principles because you can't forecast the future. You need to make some decisions purely based on principle. You know, what's the right thing to do? And just go with that because you literally can't forecast the future at this stage. And just focus on your processes and your systems and try and do the best you can. The outcome will look after itself.
I wish some of the Proteas batsmen could adopt that mindset and focus on the next ball. They didn't seem to be able to do that over in Pakistan in the first test. But Elmar, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you and sharing some insights into the impact that the second wave is having on the aviation sector and FlySafair in particular. Good luck as the year ahead progresses. And we do hope that government is listening to you and that we start to see some easing of those restrictions, opening up of beaches and lifting of the alcohol ban as well. Take care.
Thank you, Michael.